Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company, along with the bad man with bad plans, Jake Del Maro, and today we're running down DDEX 3-2 Shackles of Blood. Shackles of Blood is written by Joshua Kelly, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulach, and Travis Woodall. This is a 4-hour mod set for Tier 1 play, tuned for 5 third-level characters. The party encounters a nefarious slave trade that has made its way into the Red Plume Guard. The mod ends at a gladiatorial arena. Introduction: The Puppeteer's Office. The module starts with propaganda in the form of a puppet show selling the law of humanity. A Harper contact informs the party that several farms have been raided recently and their inhabitants have been disappeared. She puts the party to task of uncovering the disappearances. Part 1. Tinfellow Valley. Party arrives at a halfling homestead that's been raided and burnt out by the Red Plume Guards. Humans have moved into the newly empty buildings. After some exploration and social checks, the party can find the trail of the Red Plume Guards. The party will need to fight off a group of the guards, led by Brex Vandermast. Alternatively, the party could find their way to an ambush site and face a far more challenging encounter. Win or lose, the party has the opportunity to speak with the Tin Fellows and find out that the Red Plume Guards have been enslaving folks in the area. Jake, start us off here. What's going on here?
All right, I'm not gonna lie. There are I don't think there's many. That's how I'll go out on a limb to say very few mods that have a puppet show. Not only that, a hand-done puppet show by a leader of the factions of the Harpers, Olisara Lightsong. Awesome. And it's a goofy puppet show. Also, it shows the importance of knowing the background of your story. Reading the adventure background of your mods just is highlighted here because there's like, what the heck is the Great Law of Humanity? What the heck's the Great Law of Trade? Like, there's certain laws here that they kind of just bring up kind of willy-nilly. But I like the fact that they put this on such a pretty much, I'll use common terminology. They put Hillsfar on blast. And it's awesome. You get introduced once again to the Harpers. You find out that the story itself makes sense. It's not too hard to follow along. I would say don't run this cold in terms of, like, if you have a little bit of understanding of how it works, but there's a
lot of contingencies here that you have to have straight when you go into it. Otherwise, it'll be very confusing when you read through it.
That's exactly it. Because there's like 3 or 4 different routes to getting to the point where you actually get to the gladiator fight, which is in and of itself a lot. So you get the information from Olisara. Awesome. You get to Tinfellow Valley, which your party's naturally, they're going to ask questions. They're going to become inquisitive of what's going on. They understand from Olisara, because she's not going to do them wrong, that whatever's going on here, or whoever's here, is lying. Unless they tell them the truth. But, character personas are going to say they're going to lie. You find potentially the Widow Miller, which she is an old woman who knows the Tin Fellows. You find the sheep that could tell you that, like, they're weary of tall folk. You eventually come along potentially Dariel Rethslane. She is she puts a throwback into this mod, as she's someone that can help lead you to an ambush, which sucks, but has ties to 3-1, which is neat because you just came off of that, and that's from the drow Oriz that you save. And I ran it. I took a little bit of liberty here, because she's going to get in your way, whether you want her to or not.
Yeah.
And I think that parties' interactions in this area would be kind of known about, because the farms that they've helped win 3-1 or wherever, I think would cause a normal amount of rabble. Be like, oh, these people are helping out. And I took the liberty where a little further on, when they were talking, I was probing questions, that my party disclosed that they helped a Riz, and we actually just circumvented the fight. That was the ambush, because I love ambush as much as the next person, but
here's the issue with these ambushes. Sometimes is like, sometimes they are so stacked. It's a fine line, right? Because a lot of times they're so stacked that the party's like, why are we even bothering, right? And then sometimes they're not stacked enough where the party doesn't know when to quit, right?
Yeah.
And so you end up just like beating everyone to
Slugging up.
unconsciousness, and it takes an
Yeah.
hour, and your party's really pissed off, or like,
You run them over. You run
or
over
you
the
run them
entire
over,
defense.
and they're like, "What was the point of that fight?" Right? And
Yeah.
so like these ambushes are really tricky, especially I think in AL where the mindset is like I'm supposed to win. I think like in homebrew you can get away with it a little bit more if you train your players to not expect to win every fight. But in an AL setting where like you don't necessarily have the same table, you don't know where they're coming from. Everybody's trying to min max most of the time. Like people are optimized. Like the expectation is they can win every fight, and when that's not the case, you end up wasting 2 hours on a battle that like wasn't supposed to take more than 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's hard to be, and you can't take away player agency, and that's so. There's sometimes I wish that'd be like when you go through a video game and you're just like, ah, darn it, and you trigger an event and you just the trap happens.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could do a semi-cut sequence like that because that would be interesting to me because I've actually the times I've run this mod, I've had this happen where they've just circumvented it. They're like they did their proper scouting and found out there's a lot of people here, and they're like, nah, it's all right. Other times I've had the knockout drag out fight, and the NPCs die, which then your response. The death of a red plume guard cannot be more extremely like highlighted here. They're gonna find out who did it, and your characters are now responsible for the deaths of a bunch of red plume guards.
Yeah.
And even though they were dirty guards, it's the red plume. They're bullies, but they're bullies that have each other's backs.
Sure.
So you would kill a lieutenant. It doesn't pan out well. I'll be honest. It does not. Like I like the idea in concept and theory and on the drawing board, but an actual execution does not feel good.
Sure, and like it causes so many like narrative like holes later on, right? Like it just makes it kind of a bear to manage like interactions in the future, right?
Yep.
Like was this particular group of red plume guards particularly hated by the rest of the red plume guard? Like justify to me why like every red plume guard in the organization isn't after you right now for killing off
like 10 guards.
to 15 guard. Like it's insane. Yeah, it's tough to like kind of get straight.
But anyway. I think it goes back to the point. It's hard unless you have like if you're starting this and they had a brand new group of people in Adventures League, I could see this mod making more sense. But in seasoned Adventure League players, you're absolutely right. They've been taught to win. There's a winnable sequence. There's probably a 99% win rate or passing rate of mods, and there's probably a 1%. Even that might be high. Of you just died in the mod. There's the mod's over. There's probably not too many, and I'll be honest, I've never been in one, and I've been playing AL for 3 years now.
Sure, and here like the contingency is like if you lose, you don't die, you can enslave, which is the point, right? Like the narrative of this module says like you get captured by the red plume to be put into slavery, right? But like what if you don't?
As soon as you kill a guard, like they make it's kind of tough because like unless you make it very clear in the very first attack from a red plume guard, which you can't do when you're doing ranged weaponry, is they're like hitting you with like the broadside of their sword. They're not cutting you. If players don't understand that, or you make that mistake about doing it, as soon as you kill a guard that they're trying to put you unconscious, like
are they gonna still continue to not try to kill you?
Yes.
Like I don't know. It's tough, right? I don't know. Yeah. It's a challenging kind of fine line to walk. There's also like the potential. I don't see it happening, but there's a potential that like your players win all the fights, and then what, right? Like all of a sudden you have to figure out how to move to the rest of this module because your players have figured out like somehow overcome the odds and defeated this overwhelming
force
encounter.
Ridiculous.
Like I don't know.
I do have to say, giving kudos to this mod, they've given multiple avenues of getting to Hillsfar. It's just, if your party decides to throw themselves at a brick wall, it's like, what now? And that kind of, I feel like if they go out and kill all the people in the Red Plume Guard, it's kind of like, I would be, I don't know. It kind of makes an internal conflict as a DM. It's like, you guys just murder hoboed them, and like, you're just as bad as them. Like, it's an extreme pull, but like,
yeah, I mean, considering like at the time they're not really doing anything but standing in buildings ready to ambush. I don't know, like there's
go
nothing about the
around.
Red Plume Guard. So there's nothing about the Red Plume Guard so far in season 3 that indicates that they are not awful, terrible people who probably deserve to be killed.
But the thing is you are now an enemy of Hillsfar.
Sure, and that's
Like,
not productive for the rest of the season.
yeah, I guess it'd be like you're like, you know, Fallout New Vegasing. Your reputation with the Hillsfar, or, you know, with the Red Plume Guards is now decreased. Like, I think that would be cool plot wise if they made it more aggressive. Like, if you had a story award.
But the rest of the
like,
module isn't. The rest of the modules in season 3 are not set up to accommodate that.
But if there was a Red Plume encounter, like, we have enough story awards or legacy things that are called nowadays that are so open-ended and do not get addressed. Throwing another one in there, and
that's true.
I'm not condoning this behavior, but I totally would say, like, from here on out, if I'm playing with the same group of people and they killed a bunch of Red Plume Guards, like, I would totally be like rolling on a percentile dice, you know, out of 10%, you know, they know you did something.
Yeah, and I mean, there's enough story rewards throughout the early seasons that are all like, this may come up in a later module that never come up in a later module. So,
well,
like,
if it was like Mole Master, it'd be a different story. But like Hillsfar, I just don't see there's a lot of CCC content that could utilize these anyway. And it's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong direction. Who knows? But we spend a lot of time dredging on this. I think the first part with the investigation, it's neat. It brings up different concepts. I like the idea that if you don't go with this girl, that you'll eventually run into this other caravan, which he becomes an important person because he's like a half-orc human. Whatever. I'm not too worried about it. It's pretty laid out pretty nicely. Just be aware if you are running this that there are, as you said, just different avenues of
there's a lot of contingencies to keep straight.
Yeah. So I think otherwise it's a pretty straightforward thing. And it's fun to run.
Sure. Part 2, The Road to Hillsfar. Regardless of their success or failure in the encounter with the Red Plume Guards, the party will need to face off in the gladiatorial arena, either to secure their freedom or by infiltrating it and putting an end to the slaving practices. If they lost an encounter with the Red Plume Guards, they've been captured and will be sold to the arena. If they were successful, their Harper contact puts them to the task. I think that's largely just a transitory part to part 3. I don't think there's a lot to get into in part 2.
Part 2 does have like more details about Hillsfar.
Sure.
I do like the box text it has after arrival. Playing up Mags, the arena slave bookie woman who also like always is weird to me when I read it. She's accompanied by a short, scarred man named Horak and a shirtless Goliath. And the Goliath is like, he wears a neck collar on a leash that ends lashed to Mag's wide leather belt. This Goliath growls and yells. It is no longer that of a human stature within, or, you know, like got the role of like person in Hillsfar, and that's something that the Hillsfar topic itself, your players have to understand that there's a lot of weird socially wrongable topics in this season, and I didn't feel comfortable saying it. I've got a very it's such a weird
and it's gratuitous rather than like narratively relevant. Like, it doesn't lead to anything.
It's just a weird, like, granted, I think that there's value in explaining it. I just don't think that it's necessary to explain the
Sure.
gravity of the situation. It's just like a character piece.
Yeah.
But then you find if you you go in, you've already met up with the hidden fellow at this point. Let's say if you're enslaved or you got into the city, you find them. Kind of cool here. With the fact that that the players hear the construction of the gladiator pit going on. They run into the elf. Otherwise, and you are, it's a fun little area. I
It gives them a little bit of information to prepare for the battle, which is nice.
It reminds me of the movie Gladiator.
Yeah,
actually, and
sure.
like very seriously, like the pits through around the Colosseum, kind of like how I imagine this going, and I would just go crazy with details if you like Russell Crowe.
Sure. It gives them an opportunity to prepare too, right? I mean,
Yep.
if you've got divine casters, they can change out the spells they're going to use based off, knowing that they hear water filling a pool.
Yep.
Those kinds of aspects give the players the opportunity to make choices that make it easier for them to be successful or ignore those choices. So
it's fun and nice.
Yep. Part 3, The Bell in the Depths. The final act of the module sets the party off against another group of slaves fighting for their freedom in the arena. The encounter features 5 platforms in the water and the task of ringing the bell on the center platform and finishing off their enemies. Just as the encounter looks to be clearing up, all hell breaks loose and slavers join the fray, looking to eliminate the party. These are the same slavers that the party has presumably encountered before. This is tough because it's like a stiff battle immediately on the heels of another stiff battle. Presumably your players could use the chaos to try to come up with some kind of alliance with their opponents. I don't know. It's tough. Like, it's a cool section. There are aspects of this kind of like war game that confuse me. I don't know, like, if the task of ringing the bell is the objective. I don't know why the gladiatorial match doesn't end with ringing the bell.
So, kind of background about this fight. The Battle of the Depths, or the Bell of the Deep Depths, whatever it's called. The thing is it's now sitting at the bottom of the Moon Sea, and that's kind of what happened. And there's actually mods that detail it a bit further and the like. So it kind of makes sense because the combat didn't stop when that city fell.
Sure.
That's kind of alleviates it, but like, this is a messy combat, not necessarily poorly executed. Just understand in your mind how the rounds are going to work.
There's a lot of moving parts.
There is an extraordinarily large amount of moving parts. There's extra things that happen, and there's cheering the crowd on. There's a lot that goes on, and explaining how the map looks if you're using a map is important. Just let people get creative, I think. Like, I'm not like I have a Triton in my game who decides to he heard that there was fish getting dropped into the water, the quippers, and he crumbled up his rations and used it as a distraction. So when he entered the water, he wasn't attacked. That's something that's very creative and useful. Sure. Whatever it takes to make it interesting, I think that's important. Kind of run with the punches. If you mess up combat, don't stop.
It's a cool encounter, don't get me wrong.
It's a cool encounter. And then there's a point in time where there will be the reintroduction of the slavers after you guys have we're in tier 1. You don't have a lot of resources. Right. I would say lay out the pain, because I would say that there's capacity to do damage in the gladiator fight, but if the players do it right, there's ways to make it less impactful. But you have a spellcaster that is haste, you have nets. Use the full capacity. Make people, give your guys advantage. It's gonna be a tough fight, but if there's a time that there's issue, you can always use a crowd falling onto people, accidentally falling in because there's a riot incited, that
Yeah,
could
or
potentially
just
distract them.
yeah, or you just have like the enemies fight off these slavers too, right? Like you've got allies that you can put on the field or ignore as you desire,
Yeah,
right? Like if things get rough for your players, like the
there's
encounter
ways
that they
out.
just had, like maybe they're on the player's side now. Who knows? Maybe, like you said, maybe spectators fall into the arena and collapse on top of uh, the spellcaster with haste. Whatever, whoever, like
Yeah.
there's ways to mitigate and make adjustments on the fly. Um,
Everyone should be, if anyone in the party says, "Oh, I didn't take any damage," you are not doing your
yeah,
job. And I
yeah.
don't I have been guilty of doing the Care Bear stare, but this is one of those combats that it's inevitable that someone's gonna go down, or there's people that are gonna get bopped real good.
There's water involved, which always makes combat more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot going on. There's zip lines, which can be used in a number of ways. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on that can make things more interesting, more challenging, potentially less challenging for your players if they find ways to like use the environment to their advantage.
Yep.
I think there's a lot here to really enjoy. Um, with the exception of like it takes a lot of prep to get all of the things straight, right? In conclusion, with the arena in shambles, the party can escape, freeing dozens of non-human farmers and commoners in the process. The farmers return to their homes. The party gains important contacts in the region. Once again, like don't overlook the notion of like contacts as rewards, right? Um, a lot of the rewards in tier 1 have largely been done away with like new seasonal rules and rules changes every year. Um, the notion of like your party knowing some folks in town is something they could come back to later, and I think that's pretty valuable.
The other thing I think is important to note is like this is put in the very last paragraph in the mod, is that they are they make Hillsfar like a battleground.
Mhm.
It's with whatever happens next with the people in Hillsfar, an open revolt against the authority of the Red Plumes. It's just so interesting that you're given that kind of control and power, but like that is 2 sentences, 3 sentences that are just not highlighted,
Kind
bolded,
of
underlined,
throwaway sentences at the end of the module.
yeah, like some throwaway sentences that are actually like super important.
Pretty pertinent, yeah, to the rest of the season. Yeah,
Like I'm
you've
not
just
saying
started
like
an open rebellion, but like it's an
you
afterthought. You
started a
accidentally did it.
revolt
Like,
in a gladiator arena, and everything is like that goes as far as like the like the ruler of the town had to leave via private exit, and all of his red guards died.
Right.
Because the wave of anger just kind of collapsed. But the coolest part about it is that's because of the problems happening in Hillsfar, and it's just so overlooked. It's overlooked. It's this first mod outside of the. It's just like I don't know why that's not like just bolded, underlined, italicized, double
put in the block text, right?
Yeah,
something like yeah.
Wait,
and maybe if you're running this season, like that's some.
Read it.
Yeah. Maybe if you're running a whole season, like maybe you don't lean into that now, but you make a point to express that in other ways in the rest of the season. Like all of this started when a gladiatorial match went very wrong, like
that's the
there
hype.
are ways to like bring this in later on that don't necessarily force you to like put a stop to the narrative and be like, you guys started a riot that starts a rebellion throughout the region. Like, there's not really a way your players will know. Well, there's not really a way your players are going to know that at the end of this module, right? They're just trying to get out of this arena, but definitely keep it in mind for the future modules for sure.
Sure thing.
So there it is, DDEX 3-2 Shackles of Blood. Thank you so much for listening to some advice to streamline and run it at your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. Toll the Dead for those notifications. Support us on Patreon, where you can see the playthroughs and inform these videos at the $5 tier. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and from now until the next time, we're all together.